All right.
Okay, we're good to go.
Thanks, Leah.
Great. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for our April ACEs quarterly event. Today, we will be talking about adverse childhood experiences, positive childhood experiences, and implementing trauma-informed practices with children. And my name is Emily Greenleaf. I'm a behavioral health specialist at the Snohomish County Health Department. I'm currently in the process of getting my master's in clinical mental health counseling, and I have a strong clinical background working with young children who are experiencing atypical development and challenging behaviors. And in addition to the trauma and resilience team, I also work in the child care health outreach program, and I've been with the health department for a little over a year.
And my name is Melinda Losvoy. I'm a public health nurse in the maternal child health program at the Snohomish County Health Department. And I work in the trauma and resilience program as well as the childhood lead poisoning prevention program. And I have worked at the Snohomish County Health Department for over a year as well. So here's the agenda for today's ACEs quarterly. We'll first go over some ground rules, then facilitate a check-in to get to know who's in our audience. Then we will dive into ACEs, which will include a definition of ACEs and trauma. We'll go over some examples, discuss its prevalence, and how ACEs intersects with other social and cultural factors. And then we will share about how ACEs affects health. We'll also discuss toxic stress and the stress response. And then next we'll talk about positive childhood experiences, which will include its definition, as well as some examples. And after that, we will transition into trauma-informed practices with children, the impact of expectations, self-compassion, and self-care. And finally, we will wrap up the presentation with a checkout and time for Q&A. So throughout the presentation, feel free to put questions you may have in the chat as they come up. And Emily will be monitoring the chat, and we will address the questions either during the presentation as appropriate or at the end during Q&A. So now we will go over the ground rules for this presentation. So we typically use the acronym ROPES to ensure a respectful and safe space for listening and sharing. R stands for respect. We are to respect one another in our different backgrounds, experiences, stories, and opinions. And O stands for oops or ouch. We can say oops if we say something that came out wrong, and we can try and say it again in a different way. And we can also say ouch if someone said something that didn't sit well with us, and then clarify why it did not. P stands for participate or pass. Please feel free to pass on participating in discussions or answering questions. We will have some interactive activities in the presentation, so you can participate or pass. But hopefully you feel that this is a safe space to participate. And E is for escuchar, which means listen in Spanish. It's a reminder for us to try and listen to each other carefully. S is for safety in this time and space, for us to openly and comfortably share our thoughts while also maintaining confidentiality. Now we would like to pause and provide the opportunity for anybody to add any other agreements or suggestions to create a safe space. So please feel free to unmute or share in the chat if you have any other suggestions for safety.
Okay, thank you, Melinda. So now we will start with a check-in, and we ask that in the chat you share your name, your work title and organization, where you're tuning in from, as well as your current cell phone background. And you don't have to share a picture in there, just describe what picture you might have. And the reason we facilitate check-ins at the beginning of our presentations is just to make the experience a little more personal and have an opportunity to get to know one another. All right, we have a mom in line at her daughter's school for pickup. Picture of roses from last spring. Picture of a grandson. Thank you all for putting this in the chat. It's nice to meet you all. We've got some pet pictures. Okay, so you can continue to share in the chat and we'll keep looking at these. I think we're going to move forward here and get started talking about adverse childhood experiences, which are also known as ACEs. So the term ACEs is an acronym for adverse childhood experiences. It originated in a groundbreaking study conducted in 1995 by the Centers for Disease Control, or the CDC, along with Kaiser Permanente Healthcare Organization in California. And in that original study, ACEs referred to 3 specific kinds of adversity that children faced in their home environment. And these 3 categories are abuse, which includes physical, emotional, and sexual abuse; neglect, including physical and emotional neglect; and then household dysfunction, family member who has been incarcerated, domestic violence, substance abuse in the home, and separation or divorce. And each one of these 10 adverse childhood experiences is counted to calculate an individual ACE score, which can range from 0 to 10. And on our next slide, we will be doing a poll through Mentimeter, providing an opportunity for those who are comfortable sharing to anonymously disclose their ACE score. We do understand that this can be emotionally upsetting or triggering, and we encourage you to skip the poll if you're not comfortable participating, but it will be anonymous. So I just want to reiterate that, and I will hand it to Melinda.
Thanks, Emily. Yeah, so now that we've shared what the 10 original ACEs are, we would like to provide an opportunity for you to anonymously share your personal ACE score. So you can see near the bottom of the slide to go to menti.com, and there's a code that you can put in, and then you can share your ACE score anonymously. If you don't feel comfortable sharing this information, it's okay to pass. But our intention with this is to show how common ACEs are and to emphasize the importance of destigmatizing and raising awareness on trauma. So we'll pause here, take a moment to go to menti.com and use the code that is on the screen. It's 4546794. And Emily will be putting it in the chat. And I will go back one slide so you can see what the ACEs are in case you don't remember.
Okay, I put a link to Menti in the chat. I also put the code in the chat, so you can copy and paste that. There does not need to be any spaces between the numbers. And we will be using Menti for a few other interactive pieces throughout this presentation.
Are you able to see this Menti screen?
Yes.
Okay, great.
And we appreciate your participation. We'll just allow a couple more minutes here. Maybe not a couple, maybe a minute.
Mhm.
Please do let us know if you're having any trouble or need any assistance. Melinda, we cannot see your screen anymore.
So here were the ACEs: physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, physical neglect, emotional neglect. Within household dysfunction, there's mental illness, having an incarcerated relative, domestic violence, substance abuse, and divorce. So take one last look at this ACEs slide. If you haven't answered yet, please take a moment to do that.
Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry, my boss came over. I had to talk to her for a second.
Oh, no worries. So if you're taking a look at these 10 original ACEs, consider if you've experienced any of these ACEs in your childhood. So have you had if you've had physical abuse, that would be one ACE. Emotional abuse, sexual abuse, physical neglect, emotional neglect, mental illness in the household, having an incarcerated relative, substance abuse within the home, domestic violence within the home, or divorce. So if you've experienced any of those in your childhood, each one would be considered one ACE. So, and then if you're able to go on to menti.com, there's a code at the bottom of the screen, and we have folks just sharing their ACEs score if you are comfortable anonymously. And I will go ahead and share the results of the ACEs score Mentimeter. So let's see. So we have 2 people who've had 0 ACEs, 7 people who've had 1 to 3 ACEs, 1 person who has had 4 to 6 ACEs, and 1 person with 7 or more ACEs. So thank you all for taking the time to share your ACEs score. As you can see, ACEs is common even within this group here. So we'll go back to the presentation. And we'll keep moving on forward. So the next slide is about what trauma is. So ACEs are traumatic experiences, and we wanted to share a general definition of trauma. Trauma occurs when a person is overwhelmed by events or circumstances and responds with intense fear, horror, and helplessness. And the extreme stress overwhelms the person's capacity to cope. So there have been additional studies around the experience of other early life stressors since the original ACEs study, expanding on the 10 original ACEs that you had previously seen. So on this slide, we have included examples of acute, complex, and historical trauma. And these additional known trauma domains are also linked to long-term negative health and opportunity outcomes. Acute trauma is caused by a single traumatic event that triggers extreme emotional or physical stress, such as the end of a relationship, passing of a loved one or pet, a natural disaster, or medical trauma. And complex trauma is caused by exposure to multiple traumatic events. And the long-term impact of this exposure is severe and pervasive. And examples include bullying, discrimination and racism, community violence, poverty, homelessness, and foster care. And then there's historical trauma, which is a complex and collective trauma that's experienced over time and across generations by a group of people who share an identity, affiliation, or circumstance. So this may include discrimination, racism, deportation, or migration, and community violence or poverty.
So now we will talk about the prevalence of ACEs. ACEs began as a study in the late 1980s and 1990s at a diet and nutrition center that was managed by Kaiser Permanente in San Diego, California. And it became the largest study ever to examine social determinants of health. Over 17,000 people participated in the study, and they found a causal connection between traumatic childhood experiences and health outcomes. So this study considers the long-term impact of the three common forms of household abuse and dysfunction that we went over. And it's important to note that people from non-dominant cultures have historically been significantly underrepresented in the ACEs research. So in this original study, the participants were mostly middle class, average age of 57, 80% were white, 10% were Black, and 10% were Asian. 74% had some college education, 44% had graduated college, and 49.5%, so just about half of them, were men. In 1998, the original ACEs study found that 64% of individuals had experienced one or more adverse childhood experience, while 12% had experienced 4 or more ACEs. And then a follow-up study done in 2012, the Philadelphia Urban ACE study, found that 83% of individuals had experienced one or more ACE, while 37% experienced 4 or more ACEs. And the key findings of dozens of studies done using the original ACEs data are that ACEs are quite common, even among middle-class population. More than 2/3 of the population reported experiencing one ACE, and nearly a quarter have experienced 3 or more. And since the original ACE study, new research demonstrates that ACEs are more prevalent for those belonging to non-dominant cultures and who are living in poverty. So here we wanted to share some local data on the experience of ACEs and the implications for depression and suicidal ideation. This data is from the 2021 Healthy Youth Survey, which was completed by Snohomish County 8th, 10th, and 12th grade students. And what was found here is that the more ACEs a student had experienced, the greater the self-report of feeling sad or hopeless, and the greater the self-report of having seriously considered attempting suicide. And we see this same pattern reflected when this is broken down by individual grade level. This data is also similar to both statewide data and current scientific literature. And then I just wanted to share the 2 questions that were asked in the survey with their exact wording for your information. So it was asked, during the past 12 months, did you ever feel so sad or hopeless almost every day for 2 weeks or more in a row that you stopped doing some usual activities? And during the past 12 months, did you ever seriously consider attempting suicide? And this, the answers to these survey questions were looked at alongside the self-reported ACE scores of these students. And so here we wanted to share this quote by Dr. Robert Block, who is the former president of the American Academy of Pediatrics. And he states that adverse childhood experiences are the single greatest unaddressed public health threat facing our nation today.
So continued research on ACEs finds that there are various factors that contribute to an individual's exposure to childhood adversities. And some examples include racial identity, level of education, and socioeconomic status. When they are included in the data, Black, Hispanic, and LGBT children are consistently shown to be exposed to more adversities than white children. Similarly, those living in economically distressed communities are more likely to experience ACEs. So poor and near poor children are more likely to be exposed to ACEs if their parents lack a high school education. They are more than twice as likely to have 3 or more categories of trauma exposure compared to children not impacted by poverty. And BIPOC are disproportionately exposed to trauma when income is not a factor. So each of these inequities play a role in an individual's exposure to adversities, and it should be considered in the implementation of a trauma-informed approach. Ultimately, trauma is an emotional response to a terrible event. It is important to note that responses to traumatic events are subjective, and every individual is impacted and reacts differently. Experiences of trauma can be ACEs, systemic inequities, or generational trauma, and it can be assumed that everyone has experienced some form of trauma. But this assumption is not intended to frame everyone as a victim, but it's to highlight that trauma is a common part of the human experience. So this is why it's important for us to approach everyone through a trauma-informed lens. So here on the right, we are sharing a more comprehensive graphic that includes not only individual adversities, but it also includes the impact of systemic inequities on an individual's experience of trauma. So on the top of this image, at the branches of the tree, you can see adverse childhood experiences. So these are the traumas that are experienced on an individual level. And the pair of ACEs brings in another layer of traumas that people face on a systemic level. So adverse community environments is the second part, of the pair of ACEs. So adverse community environments and inequity contribute to the experience of trauma. And at the roots of the tree, you see environmental inequities, including poverty, discrimination, community disruption, lack of opportunity, lack of access to resources, and community violence. And by focusing on improving equity within the community, we can prevent further trauma from occurring and improve long-term health outcomes. So on this slide, you can see that there is a powerful and persistent correlation between the more ACEs an individual experiences and the greater the chance of poor outcomes later in life. And this includes dramatically increased risk of heart disease, diabetes, obesity, depression, substance abuse, smoking, poor academic achievement, time out of work, and early death. So specifically, individuals with an ACE score of 4 or more are 2.5 times more likely to have COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, than those with an ACE score of 0, and 2.5 times more likely to have hepatitis, 4.5 times more likely to have depression, and 12 times more likely to have suicidality. And then if an individual has an ACE score of 7 or more, there's 3 times the lifetime risk of lung cancer and 3.5 times the risk of ischemic heart disease. And ischemic heart disease is the #1 killer in the United States. So related to this, we have a quote from Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris that states, "Exposure to early adversity affects the developing bodies and brains of children. So there are real neurologic reasons why folks exposed to high doses of adversity are more likely to engage in high-risk behavior. And that's important to know. But even if you don't engage in any high-risk behavior, you're still more likely to develop heart disease or cancer." So experiencing many ACEs, as well as things like racism and community violence, without supportive adults can cause what is known as toxic stress. And this excessive activation of the stress response system can lead to long-lasting wear and tear on the brain and body. And this effect would be similar to revving a car engine for days or weeks at a time. And prolonged exposure to cortisol and other stress hormones is toxic, and it does make changes to the brain. So this means that you may encounter children who are perfectly adapted to survive in their home environment, but they may struggle to turn off their behavioral and stress response adaptations in other situations or environments that are outside their home. And those coping mechanisms that they may use at home may be adaptive and helpful in the high stress situations, but they become harmful and maladaptive when they are unnecessarily triggered.
So the stress response includes fight, flight, or freeze behaviors that are likely protective reactions stemming from subconscious remnants of past incidents. So a person's environment and experiences shape their reactions and their behaviors. Our brain is designed to prioritize our survival, releasing necessary hormones like adrenaline and cortisol for fight, flight, or freeze responses to activate. And while this can be adaptive and life-saving in dangerous situations, it can cause long-term damage to one's health if it's chronically activated. And this chronic activation can make it difficult for the brain to recognize when the stress response should be turned off versus when it's actually needed. And so now we're going to share a clip from Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris's TED Talk on how childhood trauma affects health across a lifetime. And as you're watching this clip, consider your reaction and any thoughts that come up for you.
I'm not sure if anyone can hear the video, but I can't.
Thank you for letting me know that. Is that a problem for anyone else?
I can hear it.
I can hear it just fine.
Okay. Um,
That's okay. Don't worry about it. Thank you.
okay, thank you.
Okay, I apologize for those who are having trouble hearing that, and I did include the link to that video in the chat if you want to give it a try later. So now that we've watched that video clip, we're going to do another Mentimeter. So if you can go to menti.com in your browser, and it'll be that same code as before. I can put it in the chat, 4546794. And we're just going to ask you to share any thoughts or reactions that you had while you were watching that. So how does the brain heal? What helps it heal for children and adults? And we will be going into some of that shortly. Good to hear the biological reasoning behind the later in life health issues. I've seen this video before, but only recently have learned about Bruce Lipton and Gabor Mate's work. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that right, which is quite similar, yes. Trauma is generational and handed down through DNA, yes. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and reactions. And we're now going to talk about PCEs or positive childhood experiences. So we wanted to segue into this section by sharing this quote by Alexander Den Heijer that states, "When a flower doesn't bloom, you fix the environment in which it grows, not the flower." So positive childhood experiences stem from safe, stable, nurturing relationships and environments. And research has shown us that PCEs have the power to prevent or protect children from traumatic events, and they also counter the damaging effects of adverse childhood experiences. So it's not just prevention, they help mitigate the effects of ACEs after the ACEs have occurred. And the association between lower rates of poor mental health and positive childhood experiences remained stable across all adults who had experienced ACEs, regardless of how many ACEs they reported having. And these findings contribute to the growing evidence that PCEs buffer the effects of childhood adversity. So now we're going to watch a short video about positive childhood experiences counteracting adverse childhood experiences.
Okay, so yeah, we're going to be diving further into positive childhood experience. Positive childhood experiences. Here we have a quote by Christina Bethel, a professor and researcher at Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. She states, when a child is met with loving, attuned, and responsive relationships on a moment-by-moment basis, they are literally learning that life is safe, that they matter, that others can be trusted. With this, they can feel safe and stay open to explore, be curious, learn, and interact with other people in a positive way. So, positive childhood experiences are the kinds of activities and experiences that enhance a child's life, resulting in successful mental and physical health outcomes. And these are some things that can be positive childhood experiences. As you can see on the slide, feeling safe, supported, and protected by family, engaging in a hobby, volunteering and helping others, having a pet, feeling a sense of belonging in school, having routines and fair rules at home, having at least 2 non-parent adults who are positive influences, and having beliefs that provide comfort. You can take a look at your own life and think of many others. Positive childhood experiences help mitigate the effects of negative childhood experiences, and such nurturance makes sure that the fight, flight, or freeze stress response does not take hold and stall a child's healthy development. So here we have a video of a 5th grade teacher, Barry White Jr. of Ashley Park Elementary School in Charlotte, North Carolina, who greets his students with special handshakes every day before they enter class. Mr. White helps each child feel safe, valued, and special by creatively infusing a child's environment with fun-filled, personalized cues of interpersonal safety. Okay, so we have another Mentimeter. This one will be about positive childhood experiences reflection. So the code is 65950414, and Emily has put it in the chat. So the question is, what are some positive childhood experiences that you have had? Take some time to think about that and share that on the Mentimeter.
We have having a hobby and a passion, family meal times. My dad sang for us often. We each had our own special song. That's lovely. Thank you for sharing your experiences. Pets, teachers, specified family time, and encouraged to try new hobbies. Great. Okay, so now we are going to shift into talking about trauma-informed practices with children. So we adults, parents, caregivers, and professionals are the most important tools in the toolbox. And our recognition that how we are is as important as what we say compels us to take time to reflect on the messages that we provide children through all of our interactions with them. So when we educate the community about trauma and ACEs, it's important that we don't just leave off on telling people about adverse childhood experiences and the negative outcomes that may result from these. It's also important to teach about shifting from the question and perspective of what's wrong with you to what happened to you. So what life circumstances, experiences, or situations have caused a person to be the person that they're presenting as today? So an example, when you might be interacting or dealing with a child who is having some challenging behaviors, instead of thinking, what is wrong with this child, try to think what happened or what's going on in this child's life. And so who should be implementing trauma-informed practices? Everyone. Parents, caregivers, teachers, healthcare providers, family members, neighbors, anyone who's interacting with children. Everyone in a child's life has a role to play in implementing trauma-informed practices. And while being trauma-informed is a key component of behavioral health services, mental health providers are not the only people who are essential. So caregivers, early childhood educators, teachers, and so on, all play an important role in buffering the negative effects of childhood trauma and in preventing it. So as the adage goes, it takes a village, and trauma-informed practices require collaboration so that we can collectively embrace an approach that is consistent with the best available evidence on promoting resilience to adversity.
Okay. As a reminder, trauma occurs when a person is overwhelmed by events or circumstances and responds with intense fear, horror, and helplessness. The extreme stress overwhelms the person's capacity to cope. So trauma-informed care seeks to realize the widespread impact of trauma and understand paths for recovery, as well as recognize the signs and symptoms of trauma in children, and integrate knowledge about trauma into policies, procedures, and practices, and actively avoid re-traumatization. So trauma-informed practices include collaboration and mutuality, trust and transparency, peer support, resiliency, voice and choice, and safety. These are principles to keep in mind to help guide you in being trauma-informed. And we will go into further detail on how to implement these practices later on in the presentation. So why? Why is this important? It's essential to implement trauma-informed practices with children because a child's history of interactions with others can influence how they perceive all future interactions. Trauma-informed practices nurture healthy physical, emotional, and social development in children. And here we have a graph that emphasizes how valuable it is to implement trauma-informed practices starting at a young age. Children have higher neuroplasticity, which means that their brain is able to change more easily and to develop new neural pathways in response to experiences. This does not mean that change cannot occur later, but that it just means that it takes more effort or is not as easily achieved as at a younger age. And as depicted by the graph, it does take greater effort to change the brain with age.
So when do we implement trauma-informed practices? And the answer is always. It's always the right time. You might be a babysitter taking care of a child in the morning. You might be a teacher during the day, a coach after school, or a caregiver in the evening. And each person impacts a child at different points throughout their day. And these single moments added together over time create lasting memories. So together we can make a positive difference by increasing the number of positive experiences that our children have. And where trauma-informed practices can be implemented anywhere and everywhere. Some examples at home while you're getting ready for school, shared meal times, nap time, getting ready for bed, playtime, at school during class, during activities, recess, mealtime, grocery shopping together, at the playground, during family outings or hobbies or activities. So there is no wrong place to implement these practices. And now we're going to talk about the how of implementing trauma-informed practices with children. So first we have safety. Safety can be created by prioritizing physical, emotional, and psychological safety during each interaction. And you can do this by helping children know what to expect by creating and sticking to a consistent routine, such as your getting ready for the day routine, sharing those meal times, playing together. All of these things cultivate a safe and secure environment, and this supports learning and self-regulation. And then when the safety is created, this can then lead into trust and transparency. And that includes sharing as much developmentally appropriate information as possible with children. An example would be explaining the why to children. So if you're telling them no, not to do something, help them understand your reasoning for saying no and redirect their behavior by providing them with an appropriate option. Try to be really clear in your expectations. If children don't know what your expectations are, they can't meet them, and that hasn't been modeled. So model the same behaviors that you're expecting and be consistent in both your expectations and your reactions. And then with resiliency, this includes modeling compassion and regulation in each and every interaction. Some ways you can do this are by helping children name the emotions you see them experiencing and validate their feelings. Validate that the whole range of feelings are okay. Provide them with the opportunities to talk about these feelings. And you can also model appropriate ways to handle big emotions. So you might see a child feeling upset or angry, and you can say, when I'm feeling angry, I like to count to 3 and take a deep breath. Give them some tools. You also want to be aware and notice your own stress level and your own reactions to situations, because children are sponges and they're constantly learning through their observations. Also model self-compassion and kindness towards yourself, especially when you make a mistake or you're feeling upset. You can say out loud, "Oops, that's okay, I'll try again. I made a mistake. It's not the end of the world." Show them that it's okay to make mistakes, especially when we're trying new things. Notice when a child excels or when they are trying something new, and praise their successes, and try to use specific statements about what they're trying, what they're doing. I like how hard you're trying. I see how much effort you're putting into this. And notice what your child is passionate about and nurture their interests. You can also teach your children to ask for help when they need it. If you see them struggling, you can say, "It looks like you might need some help. Can I help you with that?" Or you can also ask them to help you with activities or chores instead of using a demand and telling them they need to do something. Ask them if they'll help you. So then next we have collaboration and mutuality. And this involves inviting children to participate just in daily activities. This can be cooking, cleaning, grocery shopping, or other age-appropriate chores. This will help build a sense of confidence and responsibility, provide specific feedback and encouragement, and praise partial successes even when they're struggling. And for younger children, play is key in supporting healthy development. So this play can be done collaboratively. Children's play is practice that's preparing them for the complexity of the social world. Children love to play, and this gives them the opportunity to connect with others as they're learning to tolerate a wide range of feelings. You can encourage interactive and imaginative play. You can help them create new purposes for their toys and allow them to lead the way while you keep the interaction going back and forth. Voice and choice. This can be supported by including children in developmentally appropriate decision-making and teaching them that their input is valued. So this can be shown through active listening, recognizing their strengths, and again, celebrating their successes. Provide children with appropriate choices. Letting them know what options are available to choose from gives them a sense of control and autonomy. Ask them questions, and this provides opportunities for them to think for themselves and make decisions. Avoid judgment so that you can maintain that safe space for them to use their voices. And when you really listen and validate their feelings, this will encourage children to continue exploring and expressing their feelings. And then finally, encouraging children to be supportive and encouraging toward others. And you can model what this looks like. This will create an environment of positive peer support. So facilitate opportunities for children to share, to take turns, and to celebrate one another.
So here we have a video that illustrates predictability, transparency, safety, and peer support in the classroom. Okay, so author Brooke Hampton reminds us to speak to children as if they are the wisest, kindest, most beautiful, and magical humans on earth, for what they believe is what they will become. And this is related to another video that we have that talks about the impact of expectations. And as you watch this video, think about the expectations that you hold for yourself, the children in your lives, whether it be your own children or children that you work with, and for others around you.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about the importance of self-compassion and self-care. We have shared strategies and examples on how to interact with children in a trauma-informed way and how to promote positive childhood experiences. And with that, we want to remind everyone of the importance of self-care and self-compassion, because to effectively care for others, we must also care for ourselves. This includes our emotional, spiritual, physical, social, and mental self-care. Not only will this set you up to better care for a child, but it will model regulation of emotions and problem solving. So we've provided some examples here of self-care and self-compassion on this slide. Reading, spending time outside, spending time alone or with others, listening to music, playing an instrument, getting creative, engaging in a hobby or an activity you like, practicing mindfulness or positive affirmations, getting some physical exercise, cooking, and getting plenty of rest. And there are many more. So now for our checkout, we invite you just in the chat here of the meeting to share a self-care strategy that you currently use or one that you plan on trying or would like to try in the future. I do yoga every morning and every evening, even if it's just for 10 minutes. Thank you, Laurel. I love that, even if it's for 10 minutes, because every bit makes a difference. Sensory deprivation float pods for meditation. Super cool. I've always wanted to try that. Precision rifle shooting, Zen-like state. I love being out in nature and caring for my indoor and outdoor plants. These are all awesome. Prayer, pause and breathe. Yes. All right, we have come to the end. We thank you all for joining us, and we'd like to open it up for any questions. It looks like there might still be some typing happening in the chat. Yes, cooking new dishes, awesome. Prayer, spending time with others. Thank you. And feel free to unmute or share in the chat any questions or comments or anything you have for us.
Thank you, Jessica.
Yeah, thank you, Jessica. Thank you for spending the afternoon with us. We appreciate all of your attendance and your time. Oh, thank you, Michael.
Thanks, Michael.
Wishing you all an awesome Wednesday evening. Hopefully some sunbeams.
Thank you all for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you. And we will be sending out the recording. Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you, Juliana.
Yes, absolutely. Share the recording with others. We would love that. Thank you, Nancy.
Any final thoughts, questions, comments? Thank you, Nancy.
Oh,
Thank you.
thank you. Thanks again for joining us.
Oops, I had to step away again. What did I miss?
We're just saying thank you. We will be sharing the recording. You're encouraged to share it with anybody who may be interested.
Is this slide also, the slides, are you going to send those out, or can you send those out, or would you send those out?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. I really appreciate this. This was a fantastic. I only stepped away those 2 times, and I told you I disclosed both of them to you.
Oh, thank you for your transparency.
But it was just fantastic, and you know, it really helps. I work with a lot of students in college that have numerous issues that come up, and it's always a good thing to take the perspective of, you know, what's happening, what has happened, what is happening, and what, you know, what are they capable of at this moment. And this is always just reaffirming that that's the best approach. Thank you again.
Thank
Oh,
you.
absolutely. And thank you for sharing. It's so true. It's good to be reminded sometimes and zoom out a little bit.
Yes. A nice presentation from both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The change starts with each of us. That is the truth.
Thank you, Terry. All right, well, that wraps it up for us. Oh, we are from the Snohomish County Health Department. And our emails are on the slide as well, if you would like to reach out to us.
Yes, thank you. I'm actually the one providing an online workshop for parents that are going through divorce or separation for the Snohomish Superior Court.
Okay.
And I really think
wow.
that this message has to be brought across our communities, and it's so difficult to do it. So keep on doing this effort. I think that you have to reach out a much bigger number of people. Sadly, parents don't have a chance to get any training, pretty much nowhere.
It's very
They
true.
don't get it in school, they don't get it in everywhere, and they just even don't think that they need the training. No? So there's a lot of resistance to these type of things when we are only really talking about personal growth and better relationships and better quality of life and mental health. But it's a huge effort that the community and organizers need to do to reach out really to bigger numbers.
I
Yes.
agree. Thank you for your efforts too, and please do feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to like collaborate in any way we can in the effort.
Thank you. Yes, Emily, thank you. Yes, I'm glad that you mentioned that, because really I think there's simple things that we can do when we know that we are all working towards the same very important goal of improving our
Absolutely.
communities. And people with divorce and separation, they need a lot of help. So referring to you, although they're not students, they should be.
Yes.
We have too much to learn about these things. And that's the major message of my training, that training, I mean, well, yeah, that training is absolutely necessary for better parenting. And for better everything, no? Better friendships and better just happiness, and all those things require on understanding these terms a lot better.
It's true.
Okay, well, that's
we all
my
use it.
spiel, and thank you very much for yours. It was great.
Thank
See
you.
you around.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you very much, Emily and Melinda. You're lovely. Bye.
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 Melinda, don't take this as a slight, but I sent an email to Emily asking for the presentation because her name popped up when I started typing. So it's not a slight. You're a good person, I'm sure.
Thank you.
I did just see that come through, and we will follow up with all of the information, the slides. The recording might take a few days. Melinda, does that usually take a few days?
Yeah, we'll have to send this to communications and they'll upload it to YouTube, and then our colleague Leah will send out a follow-up email.
So thank you both. Very cool.
Yes, keep your eyes peeled.
Kendra, we see that you're still on. Do you have any comments or questions for us?
Actually, I'll ask one quick question again, since I
Yeah.
seem to talk the most here. When are we going to start meeting in person again? Feel like science has told me it's okay, we can, so I'm ready.
A great question.
We,
Try to only ask the best ones.
since Emily and I have started, we've been doing these virtually, but that is a good question on if we will be doing these in person. Have you attended an ACES quarterly in person before?
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
definitely. Yeah.
Were they held in the auditorium at the health district building or?
They were on the 3000 Rucker, I think is the address.
Yeah,
And there's a classroom as you go in to the left, kind of at the end of that open atrium area, and then
yes.
off to the left again. So
Oh, we will have to look into this because like Melinda said, we both began our work here during pandemic time, but it would be lovely to do some real life stuff.
yeah, it was great to have it in person, and you know, the presenters would present in person, and then there was a screen and all that to do all the
Yeah.
presentations on for PowerPoints in the background. But it was just nice to see that humans, you know, because there's the networking piece of it that we're missing a little bit
Absolutely.
of.
I agree.
Get my ugly mug off here. Thank you both again. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Have a
We'll
nice
talk
rest
with you
of your
soon.
day. Leah, can you